So you just closed on a house, moved in, and you're kept awake all night by the neighbors, barking dogs, and loud music. You ask them to please tone it down, and they rudely tell you to mind your own business. So, what do you do now? Call the police? It's not a great way to begin life in a new home. And you're thinking, if I had known about these people, I wouldn't be so quick to buy this house. Is something like this a disclosure requirement on the part of the seller? Today, we're going to talk about disclosures, what the seller must provide, and what they are not required to provide. And by the way, our contact information is below. And if you're wanting to learn about buying or selling a home in the Eastern Panhandle, consider subscribing. So, noisy neighbors. In West Virginia, there's no specific law or regulation that requires a seller to disclose information about loud neighbors or barking dogs to a potential buyer. If the seller is aware of a bad noise problem and it is significant enough to impact the buyer's use and enjoyment of the property, it may be advisable and the right thing to do for the seller to address this problem before putting the house on the market and then disclose it to the buyer. But, in a lawsuit, if the buyer decides to sue, who knows in any lawsuit. But generally speaking, it's not a disclosure requirement. Here's what is required for a seller to disclose. Any known material defects or issues that could affect the value or desirability of the property. Key word there is known. There's a disclosure statement that's required on all West Virginia properties, which asks questions about the condition of the property. The last page is a disclaimer. And very often you'll see the questions X'd out and the last page, the disclaimer, signed. And this usually happens with sellers that have never occupied the property. But, even if that's the case, the seller is still required to disclose any known material defects or issues that could affect the value of the property. So this would include things like structural issues, foundation problems, leaks, mold, electrical or plumbing problems, environmental hazard like lead-based paint, asbestos, radon, property boundary disputes or encroachments, zoning violations or pending building permits, property history. The seller must disclose any known history of the properties, such as whether it was previously used as a meth lab or if it has a history of flooding. And also the utilities. The seller is obligated to disclose information about the availability and source of the utilities on the property. In addition to these disclosures, a seller is required to provide a resale certificate from the HOA or any documents and covenants and restrictions associated with an HOA in the subdivision. So here's what's not required for the seller to disclose in West Virginia. A seller is not required to disclose if someone died in the home. And, some buyers may want to know if there's been a death or crime that occurred in a home. And if they ask the seller or their agent about it, the seller or agent has to answer truthfully if they choose to answer the question. However, there's not a requirement that the seller must volunteer information about a death or crime. Future development plans. While a seller may have knowledge of future development plans near the property, they are not required to disclose this information unless the plans are finalized and would impact the property's value or desirability. So, as a seller, it's a good idea to disclose what you are aware of because of that statement saying any known material defects or issues that could affect the value or desirability of the property. If you know of a problem, best to address it before going on the market and then disclosing what you know to avoid any future legal issues. As a buyer, It's a good idea to assume you need to learn everything that's important to you about the property. So thorough due diligence, and do things like researching the history, including its sale price, the taxes, any liens or other encumbrances. You should also research the neighborhood, the school district, crime rate, and other factors that may very well impact your decision to purchase the property. Get a home inspection and any other inspection of the property may warrant, like radon or mold. Both sides are going to want to avoid any legal issues. So, best practice: seller disclose everything they know, buyer does thorough due diligence. Thanks for tuning in. And you might want to check out the video over there on the right. It has some good information about HOAs, how to spot a bad one. And with that, I'll see you next week. Have a great week.